Welcome to Theme Park Academy, where we speak directly to those who are influencing the theme park industry and are involved in every aspect of it. We've got a really great show ahead of you where we speak to Damien Gray from RWS Global about all things haunted attractions, considering it is October. But first, before we get to that, let's go to Theme Park Pulse to talk about all your theme park news.
For this week in Park Pulse, the first story is about Oktoberfest. It's wrapping up and actually had over 6.7 million people over 16 days. It is continually kind of the North Star of outdoor attractions or fairs, carnivals, whatever you want to call it. You know, I think when you say fair or carnival, it in no way really does justice to what Oktoberfest is. It is the world's largest party, over 7 million liters of beer. But it really is a masterclass in just running this many people through a small space, and especially because so many people that go to Oktoberfest are from all over the world. It's not just Germans, but you get people across the globe coming. So I've been lucky enough to go a few times. I hope you get to too, because it really is a world-class experience, different from anything else.
What was really fascinating about it as well, Adam, was that I was reading online that they had the least amount this year of like underage drinking cases and other legal things happening, or illegal things rather. It's the lowest case ever, but it's one of the highest cases of beer consumption, and that like just didn't marry up. But it's incredible to see that they've done so well this year in terms of like operating it and managing that, and also the fact that per capita one person had a liter of beer is just incredible.
Yes, yeah.
It's
And
phenomenal.
like I said, I've been lucky enough to go a lot, and I am amazed. I do think there's something about the German mentality that makes it work there because, you know, when we've had Oktoberfest here in the States or other places around the world, the number of drunk people I see is quite outstanding. And yes, you see some people that have a lot to drink there, but and all the times I've been, I think I've seen maybe one fight or altercation. There's just sort of a different vibe when you're at Oktoberfest in Germany that starts with the Germans and then really spreads to everyone who visits.
Yeah, it's incredible. It really is. The next news that we've got, Adam, is a new underwater theme park has been planned for Tenerife. Now, calling it underwater theme park, maybe stretching it a little bit, but it is incredible what they're trying to achieve. And it's a very eco-driven space that is split into two parts. We have the Garden Gate, which is a big gardens and an entrance area, which is thriving with flora. And then you've got this sea gate as well, and sea gardens, which is the underwater gardens. So they're creating an amazing diving spot for people that is very much like a themed attraction down there, but they're also rebuilding reefs in the area as well. So it's really going to have a great effect on the local economy and the local ecology as well. So it's just incredible to see. And I think when they called it an underwater theme park, I was a bit like, oh, that's a bit of a stretch. But when you see it, it genuinely is like an underwater theme park. It's amazing.
No, I really like the idea, and I agree. I think we're going to see a lot more of this over time, where whether you want to call it sustainability or ecology driven, there's a lot more of those type of projects in the pipeline right now. And they may not be traditional amusement park, water park, but I think the eco factor is what we're going to see a lot more of in parks to come.
It's like you say, it's great to see, and I love the fact that actually this is about the local environment. It's
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
going to affect the local environment. And again, for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 years down the line, people are going to be able to see the good that this has done for the environment as well. And these new reefs that have sprung up from the seabed. I'm so excited to see it. It sounds brilliant.
Definitely, definitely. Well, that's it for Park Pulse for this month. We want to get on to our interview with Damien. I'm super excited. As you know, Mark is like our haunt expert here. I am the haunt novice, so I think I'm going to learn a lot from an expert like Damien. So let's jump into it.
So we have a very special show today. Seeing as it's spooky season, Halloween season around the world, my favorite time of year, we have got an absolute expert for all things haunted houses and Halloween based. So we have Damien Gray, who is the senior executive creative director of RWS Global. So he's going to cover exactly what he went through, and it's great to have you on the show, Damien. So do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me. As I said, my name is Damien Gray, and we are in haunt season. So it's a good subject to be talking about. This year alone, I think our company has touched more Halloween than any company could possibly touch, from Jimmy Fallon's To Nightmares to the entire Six Flags program to just doing the Nun in Spain. So I'm full deep in spooky season as I start to work my way into the holiday season. So yeah, it's good to talk about that. But I'm senior creative director of the RWS Global across all of our companies. By trade, I'm a director and a writer. I came up in the industry in the themed industry as a director, opening the Hyperion Theater at Disney, and then opening Universal Beijing Resort, also opening Disney California Studios, also opening Disney Walt Disney Studios in Paris. So got pulled into the themed entertainment world by way of the legit world of theater on a Broadway track, and then suddenly just found myself at Disney. So since then, I never looked back. I love the industry. I love the space. I love, more than anything, I love how passionate the audience is and how unjaded they are. I mean, they show up in a theme park in a peak state, and if you disappoint them, shame on you, because they want to love it. They want to have a good time, right? But I come at this as a writer-director, and as I've sort of progressed in my career, from being a show director to being an artistic director to being a show director, then becoming a creative director, then becoming an executive creative director across all of the companies, which allows me to put teams together, develop projects, have multiple projects launch at the same time, and kind of oversee them and mature them as they go. Usually it starts with my vision, and then I put a team together that I can trust to bring that vision to life. So that's the main difference. I guess the higher you go, the less you do yourself, it seems. I didn't know that was going to be the case, but it is sometimes, unless the client insists that I do it, and sometimes they do. I just created, not only did I develop and make the Nun in Spain, I directed it as well. So it's a rare opportunity where I get to do that. I come from the immersive theater world. I started my career, making shows in nightclubs. And so I'm sort of addicted to that sort of wild, anything can happen energy. And certainly haunts are that. So when I found myself doing my first haunt at Universal Studios Japan, I found like a perfect meeting spot of all the disciplines that I've been working with over the years, from multimedia to disciplines like dance, opera, ballet. It just seemed to all make sense in the haunt world somehow. I know that seems abstract, but I found myself like never having done it before. I just found that I had all the tools, because when your creative DNA is founded in a nightclub, you're just sort of used to the energy being 360 and coming at you every which way, and you have to turn on people. The point of view constantly changes, and that's the nature of a really great haunt, isn't it? Where you're not quite sure where to look. Anyway, I know I said a lot there, so I don't want to monologue. Let's have a conversation.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you so much for all that. I think you've worked on some incredible projects, and I think it shows with the enthusiasm that you've got as well. It's great to see how much love you put into the projects as well that you're working on. What you've kind of covered how you started in the industry regarding haunted houses and how that all came about with the Universal project. But what do you think are the key elements that make a really successful haunted house, especially within the sort of theme park environment?
Yeah, I think the answer to that question kind of has evolved over time, because all of a sudden, we have a world of horror haunts, and we have a world of cinematic walkthroughs. And oftentimes, like, I've heard, that word cinematic walkthrough as an insult from the haunt world in some ways. Oh, it was more of a cinematic walkthrough, meaning it wasn't scary, right? I loved being in the world, but it didn't scare me, right? I always believe that world building is essential, and obviously a lot of that is budget driven. How 3D can you get that world to be, and then how much of it can you erase with darkness? Obviously, terror, being afraid at its highest level, is what you're after, right? Like seduce them in, really stoke their curiosity, and then reward it with a terrifying scare. Also disorientation. I do a lot of work with like haze and mirrors and strobes, which makes a lot of people sick. That's okay sometimes. And shut your eyes and try to get your way through it. I like to work with I like to work with pure darkness in contrast to stuff like that. So disorientation is a psychological thing you can blend. So if it's all jump scares, you get numb to it at some point. But if you add a world build and then you add disorientation and then you add jump scares and then you add multiple performers to create multiple angles of attack, 1 person, 2 person, 3 person, 4 person attacks, distract, attack. I think if you're creating an experience that maybe lasts 4 to 6 minutes and it's constantly surprising, and I always think the best barometer is when I'm walking through, like just having just finished the Nun and opened it, when it scares me, because I've given those performers like a range of positions that they can go, and a lot of them are floaters, so you don't really know where they're going to be at any given moment. And I like to do a lot of chasing, like where they're chasing you or they're running away from you. So it's the, you know, scare is first and foremost. And if you haven't achieved that, you haven't really built a haunt. You've probably built a cinematic walkthrough. But I think scaring people in surprising ways, because you got the people that, you know, walk in who are like haunt people, right? And true haunt people, they're there to have a really good time, and they may know all the tricks, but you want to surprise them. And it's always nice when you do surprise them, because there's an extra satisfaction if they were expecting someone around that corner or out of that blind or out of that hide, and suddenly you drop something down from the ceiling. Wait a second, right? So I think to me is that kind of, how do you trigger those surprise moments, and how do you make them believe one thing and where they expect it, and then where they don't expect it, attack. So long answer to that very short question was scare them, but scare them smartly. And if you do that, they should leave that experience going, I at least have 1 or 2 moments that they have never seen before. And so I'm always challenging myself and my team. Have I seen this before? How can we innovate it? How can we stretch it? How can we make this appear differently, even if it's been done before? And I think we have a lot of really nice analog scares in the Nun that are very surprising. Happy to say to the haunt people out there are literally people passing out in it and being carried out. Yes, job done.
I've seen some. Sorry, I've seen some videos of the Nun as well, and the Nun just looks incredible. I've seen some videos on what you said about relying on darkness. Without kind of spoiling anything, I think that attraction, specifically what you said, resonates really well with that, doesn't it? I think from the videos that I've seen, it is really thinking outside of the box how to use darkness to the advantage.
Yeah, I think something to know about it is that there are 12 rooms that are incredibly highly detailed, but the only light is your flashlight. We control that flashlight. We could turn it off. We program it to sputter, to fade out, where you're literally dropped into, at the worst moment, you're dropped into complete darkness. Your flashlight comes on and there's someone in your face. Like then you can't trust. The only thing that's getting you through is that flashlight. But when you have people like that are very curious, right? The curious minded, they're using that flashlight to see all the details. And I train the performers to think deer in the headlights, get caught in the beam and react to the beam and then disappear and change your angle. So it's constantly, I say this pretty confidently that you'll never have the same experience twice in the Nun. You won't, just because it's what you do with your life and what that performer does in playing with that light and chasing your beam and ducking your beam, because they're trying to follow the last person they saw. Meanwhile, there's 3 other people approaching from the other side. I don't want to give too much more away, but that's the fun of it. That's the fun of it.
No, that sounds brilliant. And I love the fact you're really playing on people's vulnerabilities, that the only thing that is keeping them safe in there is the torch that you're controlling. Yes. Such an evil way of controlling the audiences going through it. It is. You've kind of touched upon really lightly the fact that there is this kind of different demographic of, let's say, independent haunters, and it's a huge industry, especially in the States. It's massive. How do you think it's different with creating a independent haunt versus a sort of theme park led one? And is there different capabilities? Is there different things that influence those 2 designs?
I think so. As I said, coming from my DNA is I'm an immersive showmaker. I'm an immersive theater maker. I don't believe in a separation between audience and performer. Like, blur those lines as much as possible. I believe in giving agency to the audience. I believe in treating the audience equal to the performer. So, and and I also believe that the experience can't work without them. If you're not doing those things, you're not doing immersive right. So when I think about the haunt world, and I think about the independent haunts, to be honest, I mean, some of the scariest haunts I've seen are independent, because they don't have health and safety to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
You have somebody going, fire marshal going, you need to cut all the haze in that room, but then the lasers don't work and the whole room's ruined. That's okay. Just get rid of the haze. They don't have that.
Yeah.
They don't have, they have this rule of distance, like arm length. They don't get any closer. Don't touch people. These people that are doing independent haunts can do anything they want, right? So, but there is a responsibility in the creative, and just because you can do all those things doesn't mean you should, and just because you do all those things doesn't mean you're going to have a great haunt. But more than almost anything else, like those, whether it's a haunted corn maze, or whether someone's moved into a storefront of a strip mall and created an experience and they didn't have a lot of money, what makes them good is those creators care. Like, to them, that's their Shakespeare. That's I've never met a more committed group of creators in my life than I have in the scare world. I mean, like, it's everything to them. Like, they'll take $100 and make it look like 1,000, and if you can't do that, then you probably shouldn't be doing it, because the nature of scaring somebody doesn't require much more than surprise. So if I jump out of a place that you don't expect me to jump up, you're going to be afraid, right? But there's a clever kind of where the art comes in, is a clever kind of psychology about it, and the fact that, like, it's not taught anywhere. Most people that make them successfully have been fans first, and then they find their way to it. Like myself, like, I've always been a fan of horror. I love horror films. I've always loved mazes, always. So long before I got involved in making them. So I came at it from a fan's perspective, and I love the kids out there in the cornfield saying, money be damned, I'm going to scare you. That's it. I love that.
No, that's amazing. And I think we've touched upon, and The Nun is a really good example. A lot of the work that you're doing at the moment is based off IP. It's based off an intellectual property. And how many haunts is it across the Six Flags parks that you've done this year for IP?
There's 6 IPs involved, and some parks got 6. And Magic Mountain and Great Adventure got all 6. And then other parks got 2 or 3 to add to their program. But we're in every single Six Flags park across the country.
It's incredible. And I think that working with IP is such a unique perspective, especially for what RWS Global do. And what would you say, working with IP, what are the challenges that you can face with working with IP compared to creating your own IP?
You got a couple of hours? Here's the thing. I think, like I said, I've spent an enormous amount of time in theme parks. A theme park is very different than an amusement park. It's different mentality, different audience. They want different things. They come to an amusement park to go on the roller coaster, right? They don't come to get lost in a world and dream. They come for the coasters, right? So there's a kind of a wild energy to that. And I think if you were to ask, and I'm not speaking for anyone in particular, but I think if you were to ask a regional amusement park, OP or IP, they'd probably say OP, because there's a lot of challenges with IPs. You're honoring a major franchise. There's more things that you can't do than you can, and you have to every single piece of creative. And I mean, from the concept paragraph overview to the final score, to the final script, to the final light design, to the final animatronic, it's all subject to approval and all subject to rounds of notes that you just have to be in service to every step of the way. Even sometimes if you feel, and I can give a specific example to this, even if sometimes you feel it's not the right way to go, it's really not for you to say. At the end of the day, the IP has to be happy. Mm-hmm. The nice thing about this was, for the most part, almost all of the writer directors were involved along the way in the process. And I found them to be the ones that yes, right? And sometimes even countermanding what the studio wanted or what the licensor wanted. But no, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. So I got an extra level because my entire career has been based in themed entertainment, working with major IPs. I created Sing on Tour for Universal and around the world, and a lot of other major IP things, Capcom, Biohazard. And so I know what it's like to work with them. And if you haven't worked with them before, you'd probably find it suffocating to some degree. You'd probably find it, well, they're ruining my creative. No, they're not really. They're just saying that idea doesn't work in this world, and we know what belongs in this world. And so when you get it right, and I'm proud to say that all 6 IPs are thrilled with what we've delivered them, as challenging as it was, because they can't control the environments. They can only control the process of what you're delivering. The parks have to run what you deliver. They have to cast them, and they have to direct them. They have to do all of that. But if you're precious about your creative, you're going to have a really hard time. But it's not your creative at the end of the day. It's theirs. You have to find a unique way to do it, like with Stranger Things. I mean, it's been done so many times, but what I hadn't seen done is anything take place in Hawkins High. So I said it in Hawkins High Halloween Party, where a rift happens and suddenly you're in the upside down version of it. Stranger Things isn't necessarily a scary IP. So you can't manufacture it. There's opportunities, more like gross, more like unnerving kind of thing. And so you'll say, well, make it, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do that? On the park side, but like, no, the IP won't allow that. They won't allow that. For instance, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I went into this going, get me electric leaf blowers. Let's treat them as chainsaws. Let's buzz them by people. Let them be terrifying. We couldn't do it because they licensed a chainsaw that's a toy. It's not scary. I think that the whole haunt is predicated upon being scared by those
yeah, that's your go-to in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, well, you're taking the fear out of it. So, but that's what they wanted because that's licensed, right? So it's not ideal for me when I feel like I had a much more terrifying solution. But you live and die by their rules. That's all there is to it. The nice thing, though, is when you have the Duffer Brothers go through Stranger Things and you have Ted Doherty go through a Trick or Treat and goes, that was great. That was amazing. That was so I've never seen that before. And you honored my film. And it's like that's worth it, right? That's what makes it worth it.
Well, and as a creator, I guess that would be my sort of question on the flip side. When you do work with IPs, what are the structural advantages on the end product that you can see?
The structural advantages?
Yeah, so just that we know whether it's just the ability to advertise the brand or the ability to do a different type of experience. What do you think those items are that really help separate it when you do get good IP buy-in on your concept? How does that maybe differentiate from just an OP?
Well, the main driver is the fact that the title is going to get people through the door, right? That's why they license it. At the end of the day, more people are going to be coming. I haven't seen the statistics on the uptick from all. I mean, they went hard with 6 IPs. I mean, Six Flags went all in with it, right? And all these new IPs are now existing with their OPs, and their OPs are like well-oiled machines, and these new pieces are all new and new technology and different ways of doing things. So kind of making peace with that. Like, well, what do we do with this? Why you just gave us your kid? We got to raise it. What is this kid? We don't even understand his language. But it's primarily getting people through the door because there's a lot of recognition, but also it gives you, like, if you were to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to ideate a couple of OPs that I'm going to go pitch them, right? Which we do that. It's wide open, right? The lens is wide. You get an IP like The Conjuring, which is my second time around with it. In the universe, I've got The Conjuring universe, and I have The Nun. So I've been in this world for 4 years now and know this world really well. It's not a world in which, possession is psychologically scary, right? But there's not Annabelle can't move. Not allowed. You can't move Annabelle. So how do we get a little bit of movement out of Annabelle? How do we get a scare out of Annabelle, et cetera? It's tricky because there's things I wanted to do that I couldn't do because it wasn't in the film.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be in the film or evocative enough of a moment in the film that would honor the film. I'm trying to think of an example. There was something I wasn't allowed. I can't remember. There was a number of things I wasn't allowed to do that I had in my original treatment because they weren't in the film. I made the case that they're of. Like I have a really violent forced baptismal where a nun is drowning another nun in the baptismal fountain. And that's not in the film, but they loved it because, okay, that works within the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there are challenges, but sometimes I think those challenges, you can't go wide, you just have to go deep. So getting people in the door and being forced to go deep instead of wide.
Gotcha. No, it makes sense. And earlier you mentioned talking a little bit about fans, right? Because, like I'm on the roller coaster side of the business and we've had this huge influx of fans over the last 30, 40 years that are not tiny, but they're part of the world of amusement park because now they actually matter. And it sounds like the haunt world's seen a very similar uptick where you get people who are experienced now coming to these different haunts. Do you find it challenging to, I guess, scare them in different ways or come up with new ideas because you do have some more experienced fans now than you maybe did 20, 30 years ago?
Yeah, it is. I have a way to talk about that will make sense to haunt goers, right? But before I say that, I will say that I was one of the most mind-blowing moments of knowledge that I got at Universal Studios Japan when I was asked to develop Biohazard for the first time. And I was like, so I had to do this huge spectacular in Gramercy Park there where I had many things going on. And there was so many people there. And I found out that park closes for a full day. They might do on a busy season, right? In a season, they might do like 30,000 people through the gate. For Halloween Horror Nights, 60,000 people through the gate. 60,000.
Wow.
So I'm like, okay, these fans are really hardcore. I think I look at it this way. One of the real challenges is if you're doing a pulsed experience, right, where you're having hold pieces and set pieces and you're setting people up and you've got groups of 8 and you can make everything perfect, right? When a conga line, you can't. It's like, call it butts to nuts, right? That's what they call it. So that first scare is ruins like for pretty much the second half of the line, right? So, but so then you challenge that by one, making sure you have at least 21 performers. You can't do a conga line maze with less than 12 is really challenging, unless you have a lot of really experienced haunt performers that can work against crowds and work against flows and come out of nowhere and not bump into people and know how to move in the dark. Like it's very difficult to do. So I'm like, well, all right, so how do I do this? We have to make sure that the front of the line gets things that the back of the line doesn't get. So therefore, the back of the line needs to get things that the front doesn't get. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to, at points in this maze, I'm going to find ways to reverse that line forcibly. By a room, by a character, whatever it is, last person's going to go first, and they're going to reverse the order on you. I do that in almost every haunt I do.
Okay.
And it's because of that. But when you have a conga line situation and you have enough people, then you have multiple blind options, right? Multiple, just every which way. And so at different angles, right? So I don't care how experienced you are, if you can't predict the attack, you're going to be afraid. You're going to get jumped. That's all there is to it. If you have limited angles, then the ability to do that becomes less and less and less, right? So like the natural pathway, if you have that kind of maze, is forward. Well, when you design a maze and you realize it's going to be conga lined and you don't do that, what happens if you change the pattern? What happens if you change direction? What happens if you bifurcate a path? All of a sudden you're not in this world of I just go straight. I hold on to the person in front of me because I'm going to break you up. I'm going to separate you from your friends. This is going to happen. So, and it's purposeful. And it's for that reason. It's not because it's some innovation that I came up with. It's because like you've got to serve the back of the line as much as you do the front.
Yeah.
So you have to constantly be doing that. So those people who are those like, you're not going to scare me, I'm a haunt person, or they're going to walk in with a critical eye to see what it is you're up to. You know that you have to scare them. So it's sort of like, okay, well, let's throw everything at it. And we had some significant challenges because going in, Six Flags, believe it or not, only wanted 5 people per house.
Wow.
5 in big footprints. I'm like, wow, that's going to be really difficult unless you want to spend a lot of money on technology to tech scare people. It's going to be hard. And so that number grew slightly, some to 8, some to 9. But like the sweet spot, I think, if you can have hold scenes, is 12. I think that if you have 12 performers in a haunt and you have pulses of 8, you're going to have a great experience in all those things being present. If you have 12 performers in a conga line, then you have to find ways to scare from the rear, and you're just going to have kind of 2 shows, like a frontline show and a backline show. And it's difficult because then if you know that going in, you can design a maze where the backstage access is multiple. You can go any which way. Performers can run here, run there. It keeps them engaged. It keeps them fresh, So some scares might not launch on this group, but they'll launch on the next. So I know that's a long answer to that question, but that's kind of the only way I can examine it.
It's great.
Good. I love it just because I think we see a lot of haunts, but we don't hear as much structural breakdown of the theater part of the experience in our industry, even though it drives so many people and so much revenue now. So I love that.
Yeah.
And I guess kind of complementing that storytelling or the structure of the experience, what do you see in the last couple of years, maybe call it post-COVID maybe, of trends or innovations that are really driving the storytelling or the experiences now for haunts?
World building. Yeah, that's the main thing. I mean, really detailed, rich environments. I don't know if you've seen the If Maze, the If in Vegas. Yeah. Again, you probably call that a cinematic walkthrough, as the Stranger Things tour was as well. You'd call that a cinematic walkthrough that has scares in it. I think that is, it's tough because that's budget driven, right? Every person in the haunt world lives for a ceiling. Please give me a ceiling. Let me put you, but because of fire codes and sprinklers, oftentimes you can't have a ceiling. So your world gets broken. So you take the walls up as high as you can, then you fake them out, right? Where you could have ceilings like at Nightmares, then you can truly, and if the budget allows, you can build an environment that is richly detailed and scary, right? And you have all means of when you have that to your advantage, then what can you do with a mirror? A lot of things, right? You can project on it where you're looking at a reflection and suddenly you're in another room. So like the idea of illusion outside of magicians or illusionists, but the practice of creating illusions, if you have ceilings and you can control it, you can do that. You can create like the next generation of the Pepper's Ghost. You can create a 2-way mirror effect. There's a lot of things you can do. But when you're in a wild environment and you don't have a ceiling, and then you're like, okay, well then it's literally about people. It's about numbers of people that you have. And then too often people lean on animatronics. And I just find like even in their best form, they are what they are, right? Like if you have an animatronic where you can't perceive they're real or they're an animatronic, then you're talking about something that has been attempted. Last year's Chucky maze at Universal is a good example of that. I spent a lot of money on that little Chucky animations. And they worked. I thought they worked really well, but it was just very expensive to do something like that. But innovations like that, like how do we use the same imagery or practices we use in illusion or we use in spectacle, or how do we put them in the dark, right? And enhance the experience that you have on a journey through the dark, because that's at their simplest level, they are just that, a journey through the dark.
And I guess with that, talking about kind of augmenting it with tech, what technology have you seen, whether it's big things like AR or just simple stuff in the past decade that you found to be really effective that augments the experience?
Yeah. Question. AR, right? I've seen some great applications of it, and it's cool. There's no doubt about it, and I like it a lot, and I trust it. But what I really love is when you see repurposed pieces, repurposed tech. For instance, like the mist curtain, right? That's an incredibly effective thing. It's been around for a long time, but using it in a haunt where projection on mist becomes something unexpected because you're in the dark. You're not used to that. So something suddenly appears and then doesn't appear. Atmospherics, like having people walk through cold mist and water in the dark. They don't see anything, but they feel everything, right? So things that work on the senses like that. And those kind of, the first time I experienced, I'll tell you, it was so powerful because the first time I experienced a cool mister was in Vegas. It was so hot out. I'm like, my first thought was haunt. I'm putting this in a haunt. So, I love that. I love things like, even though I don't get to do it anymore because people are so worried about health and safety, dropping birdseed on people's head in the dark. Like that effect is like wildly effective because it feels like things are crawling in your scalp. You can't really figure out what it is. So now we use like rubber particles to drop on people's heads. So it's really, I say this to say that it's not so much that the tech is new, but it's being used in a way that you haven't seen before. That excites me in particular. I think because it's also, there's no question, like you're not trying to create a patent with it. It's been done. Like just give me that tech and put it in there and let's use it. So fans, air conditioners, heaters, all of that. Like these are things called big ass fans, which are, have you ever seen them in outdoor cafes?
Yeah.
Amazing what they do in a haunt. Literally, like you have a room full of like paper and it's dimly lit. And you're just walking. You don't know that you're walking on paper. That fan goes on, strobe lights start, and then you're in a storm of like massive paper, right? And it's wild, but it's nothing new. It's just taking older things and creating an effect with them. Yeah.
Brilliant.
And with all that, we're talking about a lot of, whether it's new tech or just bodies, and bodies cost money every hour. How do you balance coming up with these just over-the-top creative environments with the practical budgets that you're handling? How do you walk that line?
Oh, boy, yeah, because coming from the world of Universal, I can tell you I've not seen budgets like that since. $1 million a haunt is nice if you can get it. So it forces you. I'm not giving exact budget figures, but let's say, if you've got $250,000, that needs to look like $500,000, or it needs to look so amazing that you're not even thinking about how much it costs. So smart design, scale, really controlling the point of view of what people look at. Because the other thing too is like I do like 3D worlds. At Parquet Warner, I created Crime Alley first, and then the Nun for them, and those environments are really detailed, richly detailed. Like you are where you're supposed to be. You're in a cemetery, you're in a chemical plant, and every detail is there, like including notes on a desk that the security guy was writing. And so the attention to detail becomes critical. So you're working in the dark, right? So you can only have what you can have. So you make what you can have really strong. And then you use darkness and transition so that you can't tell the difference. And I think you'll see that in some of the Six Flags haunts in particular Trick or Treat, which is really fun to make because it needed to do a lot of things, but it didn't have a budget to support doing all those things. So it's almost like walking through the dark and encountering sets suddenly, like theatrical sets.
Okay.
Right? Stuff happens. So you use the darkness, you use the transitions, and the more you do that, the less you're theming, the less it costs, right? And the more you can put a premium on, let's feature this moment. Like this is a hero moment. I need this. Like if you need it, like for instance, you need a good hero dummy, right? Like a fireman's carry dummy or something that looks real. That's going to cost you a couple $1,000. It is. So there's nothing you can really do about that. You need a static figure. You can't get a mannequin from a store. You have to invest in this. So the question is, how many of those can I have? What room is going to get that? This room doesn't need to be detailed. This one does. It's kind of like having a budget that's not enough, or feels not enough. It's always a portfolio of trade-offs, right? What are you trading out for?
Yeah.
What am I opting for? I can get this, but I can't have that because I can't have everything. But I want this. This is important, so I'll dispense with this. You have to be flexible that way.
I will say though, I've never met people who are better at using a budget than people from like a haunting background. And I think because a lot of when I used to do it in the past and some haunts that I've worked on, we were given the smallest budget you can imagine, and the team was tiny. We didn't have resources to kind of boost the team up to kind of have scenics everywhere and whatnot. So we literally used what we could find, and a lot of it was authentic props that people were giving away, or furniture, or whatever that may be, if it's a haunted house, for example. And I firmly believe people from haunt backgrounds or people who work on haunts, they can make a budget go so far.
They're scrappy because they come from scrappy means, a lot of them. Like I said, I went to a haunted corn maze 2 seasons ago in New Jersey, and I was blown away by it. And so I asked everybody I could, like, show me the person who created this. I want to talk to them. And so I found them. It was a woman. And we started talking, and I said, I got to ask you a simple question. Like, how much was this? And she told me a number, and my mind just melted. I mean, I think she said like $27,000, 27,000 US dollars. I had the shit scared out of me for nonstop in a corn maze. All they did was cut out a maze in the corn, and they just used it beautifully. And they themed what they could theme beautifully, and they put their money into really amazing masks and makeup and digging holes in the ground that people came out of, and it was just incredible. Like, I was like, for 28 grand, you did this. I was like, bravo. How quickly can I get you from this and hire you? So yeah, it's like they're scrappy. They figure it out. Like, I met another guy a number of years ago in Jersey. I was driving, and I drove by a strip mall, and I noticed that there was a crew of people working out front, and I could tell this is definitely something. I thought maybe they were opening a Halloween store or something, but I was like, nah, they're building a haunt. Let me go investigate this. And so I went up, and sure enough, like they had this place had been not leased for months and months and months. So they leased what was a former like CVS, a drugstore, or whatever, or something like that. And so they leased it for 1 month because the landlord was like, I'm making no money here. If you got some insurance, I'll let you do something in here. Just can't build anything permanent. Like, we want to do the opposite of that. So they worked out this great deal where they got it for a month. They built a haunt. I think they had $50,000 to build what was inside. Again, I went back and I watched it, and it wasn't great, but what was great was this ambition to do that, to see an empty space and go, I want to build a haunt here. I love that. It's that mentality, though, that this particular genre in the industry has that, and it's great. Hire those people because they know how to stretch a dollar.
Yeah. And I guess with that, you've worked on now, like, going from universal budgets to a whole bunch of different levels. What is your favorite one you've worked on, and what project do you think, or for that project, what made it so special? What made it stand out for you?
That would have been a much more difficult question for me to answer. I have to say, like, The Nun is 3 for me, and having just opened it, and it was because, like I said, I've been in this universe, and I have really struggled to make scary. Really, the Conjuring universe, which is open now at Six Flags, is people are saying it's the scariest thing of the whole program, and we worked really hard to get it with that. So, but my focus was someone like, okay, I've got to stay true to these worlds. It's Annabelle, it's The Nun, and it's the Conjuring. So I've got to work within those parameters. But I've already done the Conjuring 1, so now I gotta make it scary. So my focus was that. When I started creating The Nun, and I had a year, right? So the Conjuring for Six Flags, I had 3 months for that whole program, just about a little over 3 months. I had 1 year for Crime Alley and 1 year for The Nun. And when you have 1 year, you can really consider everything you do But I knew on paper that we had something really terrifying. We had a really good idea about this flashlights, and we had some really good tech under development that we did in-house, which I'm proud to say is, we nailed that, and we have that. That's ours. And RGB controllable flashlights, essentially. It just on paper was terrifying, because if you get it right on the page, it'll be right on stage, right? And that's where you spend your least amount of money, on the page. So get it right there and then move it on. The process was smooth from day one. The cast was freaked out, even walking through the dark with a flashlight. We just did these exercises where they were freaked out. So I knew we had something that worked on every level. And then it dawned on me like, wow, it's because I've spent so much time in this universe trying to focus on making it super scary, because sometimes supernatural is not scary. It just isn't. It's cool to look at. It's weird, right? It's weird, but so the Nun's my answer right now, just because of the process and the creative intent was, God, I gotta amp this up. I gotta amp it up, and there's something weirdly scary about nuns. It's nuns with rulers and holy water scepters. It's like there's something throwing water at you in the dark. It's like it's in Latin and whispers and weird backwards stuff. It's unnerving to people. So we always had that in the Conjuring and the Conjuring universe, but then finding innovative scares. I just think it all came together. Like I think of like the Nun is the tip of the spear and that cannon of work for me. So I'm going with the Nun at the moment.
That's awesome.
I'm gonna throw a question at you now. Out of the attractions that you haven't worked on, what's been your favorite haunt that you've ever visited?
I love that question. Haunting of Hill House. Halloween Horror Nights. The world was incredible. I saw things in that I'd never seen before, like a 15-foot tall guy. I was amazed, and he's scaring people, running across hallways. I was like, that blew my mind. I loved it. I thought, again, to something that wasn't in. This is no knock on it. I didn't think that The Last of Us at Halloween Horror Nights a year ago was scary, but I loved being in that world. I loved it. It was so cool to be in that world and feel like you were living the movie. So I really enjoyed that a lot. But the fun, and I've used this as an example. I loved Exorcist, True Believer last year. And I loved, I didn't find it jumpy scary, but I found it wildly unpredictable. Yeah. And I adored it. I thought it was a lot better than the film. So that really stands out. So Haunting of Hill House and Exorcist, True Believer, those are two that really are of modern time that really affected me.
Thank you so much, Damien, for that. I think it's been great to get your perspective on it. Obviously, you've done so many incredible haunts, and from a theatre background as well. It's amazing to see that mix that you have together. We are now on to the Fastpass Round. So in here, we give you 3 very quick questions, and we want you to answer them without having to think too hard on them. I find this really difficult to kind of answer on the spot, so I'm looking forward to seeing your answers. First up is, what is your favourite amusement or theme park?
Islands of Adventure, Velocicoaster.
Very good choice.
So you really answered questions 1 and 2. So the second question was favorite track. So Iowa would be like your favorite world that you've been in, and Velocicoaster is sort of your favorite experience in a world.
Yeah, I think so. For sure. I mean, I love. I mean, trust me. I opened Universal Beijing Resort, but I had to leave before it actually opened. That part is spectacular, but I haven't been able to spend any time in it open. But it's spectacular, magnificent.
Cool. And what about the world of that Iowa when you went there for the first time? What stood out to you about it being different or special or spoke to you?
I like pirates. Who doesn't love pirates?
Sure.
I just thought that the theming was the theming there is so solid, and I love that they really do tell a story, right? every land, every transition is just, there's no empty moments. Every moment's a moment, and it's seamless in its build. And you've seen them add Potter seamlessly, then new rides, new lands, connect them beautifully. Like, there's not a mistake. There's not a logic mistake in onboarding to be had in that park. It's about as perfect a thing as there is. I still maintain the gold standard in live is Universal Studios Japan. I don't think until the advent of Sing on Tour and Born, executives at Universal would admit that they were not great at live entertainment. They tried, but that focus was rides. When it became more live entertainment, now it's becoming a thing. But USJ from the beginning was always live. It was always about live. The live show aspect was as important as building the new Dream Coaster. It was always like as important. So USJ holds a pretty strong position in my heart.
Awesome.
Funnily as well, Islands of Adventure is my favorite park.
Yeah.
So I think it just feels very special. I think the moment you walk in there, it feels like you've been transported to another land. And the whole Universal Studios Florida as a whole, I'm just a huge fan of those parks, and I'm so excited for Epic Universe.
Yeah, it's going to be
excited for it.
It's going to be absolutely amazing.
And the last question is, what do you think a key trend is going to happen within theme parks? What do you think is the next emerging thing?
I think a complete world that lives and exists in a 360 dimension where you're there. Like Westworld is the future. Like that. I believe that is probably where we're going.
I definitely agree. And Adam, you and I have spoken about this at length as well. And we definitely agree that world building is going to be the next kind of frontier for us all within themed attractions, themed entertainment. I'm going to give a kind of special shout out now to Toverland as a park. And I think in Europe, I genuinely believe they're probably one of the best, them and Efteling, at creating an entire world with their kind of own IP. It's just incredible. Like, it is just, those parks are transformative when you walk in them. It's amazing seeing them. I'm a huge fan of both of them.
Yeah, I've not been to either, and I've been trying to for years. So it's definitely on my calendar next year to tour both of them, because I've heard nothing but incredible things.
Definitely worth visiting.
For sure. Yeah. Well, thank you, Damien, so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Awesome. And for everybody out there, if you have ideas on future guests, hit us up on the socials at Dream Park Academy. Let us know who you'd like to see. As always, want to say a big thank you to our guest Damien for joining us, as well as blooloop, blooloop.com for all the news in the attraction industry, as well as the podcast. And you can find me at Roller Coaster Sales Guy, Mark on LinkedIn, Mark Lofthouse. And Damien, where can they find you or the company? Or if they want to get a haunt, who do they get a hold of?
RWSglobal.com.
Perfect. We will see you next month, and I hope everyone has an awesome month of haunts coming up.
Thank you very much. See you at IAPA.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.